Truly feels like a lifetime ago when Bryson Tiller broke onto the scene and had those huge hits that he did with his debut album Trap Soul. To go that long without another album or really much else in music at all is quite a strange thing, I think, especially with modern mainstream artists. Once they get really popular, they kind of end up flooding out albums even when, you know, they probably should think about taking a break. But Bryson Tiller decided to take a big break. In my opinion, he was part of the confusing mainstream modern R&B wave that never really resonated with me at all. I was just very left out in the cold every time I came across one of these types of artists. Party Next Door is another good example. Perhaps a longer lasting example of that though is in fact Drake, who has been really at the front of mainstream music for so long now, and since about 2016, 2017, he's been putting out really long-winded R&B albums. He has the occasional detour into something else, you know, he'll drop a rap song here and there or a dancehall song, but a lot of his albums are just filled with really slow-moving, slow-paced R&B tracks that just feel very uninspired, and I feel like that's where Bryson Tiller began, really. But Anniversary actually feels a bit more upbeat, and it doesn't bore me this time around in comparison to his debut, which is what made me want to review this, because I just kind of give it a listen on a whim. Just thought it's really short, it's only about 30 minutes. I was like, I'm not going to give too much of my time away just to check this out. And I actually found myself going back to it a few times, and each time I was fairly happy. I was fairly impressed with what I was hearing. The thing I would say as a more critical way to start out a positive review is that it still reminds me of a lot of modern R&B tropes. I do still think a lot of modern R&B has become very homogenized. I think more so than a lot of genres actually, because so much of it just ends up sounding very similar. You know, there's other genres out there that you could point to. It's not just R&B. You could say the same about pop punk, where just so many bands ended up sounding exactly the same. But I think I just have a higher expectation of R&B because when it's at its best, it's fantastic. And I just personally don't feel like I've heard it at its best from a very popular artist for quite some time. So is this album totally original? Not at all, really. Are the lyrics particularly inspiring or impressive? No, absolutely not actually. Look, if you go into this album for lyrics, you're probably going to think my review is complete dog shit because the lyrics here aren't exactly anything special. So for me to say it's actually a pretty good album, you might just totally disagree. But what I do enjoy about it is how comfy it is to listen to. I think a lot of the vocal melodies are really nice. I think Bryson Tiller's voice actually comes through on a lot of these tracks, and he sounds very nice as a performer. Whereas before on his debut album, I just found it so dreary and so monotonous the whole way through. I actually think his voice sounds a lot better these days. The way he works in his vocal melodies on Always Forever, I think is pretty admirable. I think he's definitely trying hard to keep the listener's attention with his singing here. Even if there may be a bit of a Chris Brown-ish type of tone to I'm Ready For You, it's not exactly the most distracting thing in the world, because I guess Chris Brown sometimes sounds really good as a singer, even if, you know, him as a person tends to be the bigger issue, really. Times Change is where he has a lot of character to his voice, definitely one of the more characterful vocal performances on the entire thing. It's important to remember too that a lot of these beats are quite trap heavy in a way. Like, you can definitely tell that the sort of modern trap wave that's gone on, especially in America with a lot of the hits these days, has inspired this album, because a lot of these beats do feel quite familiar in that sense. But I think he's doing a good job on this track of like keeping you on your toes with his flows, because he's shaking things up. Even if the beat doesn't necessarily change throughout the song, he's definitely putting in an effort to kind of switch things up throughout. Even if that I gave you 10% line makes no sense to me, because why would you brag about giving 10%? Usually people are like, you know, I give it my all. I gave it my 100%, 110%. But this guy, he gave you 10%. So, you know, he's better than the guys that give you 5%. So take him. Timeless Interlude is surprising to me because it's an interlude, but this is one of the best tracks here because of the lovely piano. I don't really know why it's an interlude. It's a decent length, but whatever, it's a good track. There's the Drake feature later on, which I obviously was talking about. Drake, he fits in nicely on this track. I guess he's sort of in his bag, in his element here, because he does songs like this anyway. I think this actually is one of the best beats on the album though, and at least his feature ends up being pretty solid. Lots of lyrics about, you know, no wasting time, kind of like trying to get the girl. You see, a lot of these tracks end up being about this type of topic anyway. You're not exactly expecting anything new here. I enjoy the closing track a lot too, mostly for that vocal sample that's kind of like interwoven within the track. It kind of like echoes when Bryson is singing the chorus, and it just ends up being really well worked in. Like, the production here is so lovely, and it feels very inspired, you know. I'm listening to something here that feels like the artist making it was inspired while making it, which again, I don't think I really ever personally heard on his debut album. So I'm just really impressed with all these little added on little things in the production, in the vocals, and this time around I think he's made a pretty good album. So that's the reason why I wanted to review it. I would have happily skipped this, but Bryson Tiller here is sounding better than he ever has, and I'm impressed, and I kind of want to see where he goes next, because if he's on a slight upward trajectory, we could see even better music from him in the future. So for me, that's a 6 out of 10, definitely worth your time, definitely solid, but I'm interested to see what you think. Do you think this is good? Do you think it's actually pretty bad? Do you think it's worse than his debut? Do you think it's better? Let me know your thoughts, I'm interested. I guess a lot of this modern type of stuff in R&B isn't really appealing to me, but R&B at its best can be fantastic, so I do love the genre, and Bryson Tiller's dropped something pretty admirable here, so hopefully you agree with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this review. Do have a good day, and goodbye.